Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on where you are on the planet. Buenas tardes, también para la gente que está en Colombia escuchándonos. Estoy muy contenta de estar aquí con ustedes para celebrar el segundo año de la Fundación Lüvo. I'm really happy to be here this afternoon to celebrate with you guys our second anniversary of Lüvo. We have a very special guest tonight with us, and we're really excited about sharing our thoughts and reflection on decolonial ecology with Alberto Gomes and Catherine Viens. We really want to make this day special because we're having the second anniversary of Lüvo in advance, because in Melbourne it's December 3rd, and the real anniversary of Lüvo is December 3rd. So we're having this celebration in a transnational perspective tonight and this morning for our people watching us in the other way around the planet. So I'm going to invite now Alberto and Catherine to join the conversation. Good morning and good night.
Hi, Priscilla. Hi, Alberto.
Hola, good evening. Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Yeah, actually, I was trying to say, okay, there's a lot of language here, no? Like we were talking about that before connecting. Thank you very much, Alberto, for being here with us tonight. Thank you, Catherine, for accepting to moderate the discussion. Also, I'm very happy to have you here with me to celebrate our second anniversary. I was telling people a little bit about Lüvo. We're really happy to have this discussion on decolonial ecology because Lüvo has been really involved in trying to decolonize thinking and praxis. So I think it's going to be really interesting for us to make this alliance with Deep in this conversation because we're working together in different projects and ideas and networking, and I think it was really nice for us to have this moment to share with you. I was thinking when preparing the conference, when I first met you, Alberto, and I was like, wow, it was back in 2013 when I was doing the master at UJI in Castellón, and was really interesting because just before I showed Catherine my paper, the paper I did for your class, you know, and it was on political ecology. So it's just to say that it's been a lot of time where we're having this friendship relation, trying to challenge our thinking and also build together those bridges between trans localities and ideas, also to make this struggle a little bit better to handle, you know, because there's a lot going on, and we're trying to make our best to change the world in some ways, no? Particularly, I'm really happy to say that this conversation is also about friendship, about empathy, about love, and it's very important, I think, to both Deep and Lüvo to work with those emotions in our practice, in our rethinking, regeneration, and that's what we want to do tonight. And I think this is the connection we want to push on, to reflect further on, and so I don't want to take much more time. Just like the idea is celebration, and I guess we're gonna have fruitful conversation because of that. Alberto, you are I don't like you're fantastic. Thank you very much for being here. I just want to say to people listening to us that you're the global director of Deep Network, but above all, you're a figure of connection between so many people around the world, activists, and the like the three of us are connected together because of you. And I think it's amazing. And this is just how I want to present you, and how you can like tell us about the story you have with Deep, your own story. And I think that your conversation with Catherine will be amazing, since she's working on the same, a lot of the same topics that you've been working through all those years. And particularly, you both connect a lot on decolonial ecology, political ecology, and with Lüvo also about peace building and nonviolent action. No, so thank you very much, and I'll let the conversation with you, Catherine and Alberto.
Thank you, Priscilla. It was a really great introduction, and I'm really happy to be here today and to celebrate the second anniversary of Lüvo. Thank you, Alberto, for being with us today. I'm really happy to finally meet you. Like it's a different kind of meeting, but I'm really happy. We had some conversation on WhatsApp, but we didn't have the opportunity to exchange. So I think it's a great opportunity. So thank you very much for being with us. So as Priscilla said in the introduction, we said that this is a collaboration between Foundation Lüvo and Deep Action Network. I heard about this network, I think like 2 years ago from Priscilla, and I found it very, very interesting. And I think for our the people that are listening today, we would like to know what is Deep Action Network, what is the work of Deep, and especially what is like where the idea came from, like to create this network, and also how it is related to your personal experience.
Yeah, thank you so much, Catherine. Perhaps since you worked in India, I should say namaste.
Yeah.
And anyway, and I also want to thank Priscilla, because you know, I was fortunate to meet Priscilla in my class, and I thank her for taking my class in 2013, that is. And she was one of the various wonderful students that I've met over the years, teaching in the Peace Masters program in Castellón in Spain. Now, I first started my teaching in a course that was entitled Sustainable Development and Environment. And in my very first class, I would say to students that I don't believe in sustainable development. I think it is problematic. It's a flawed concept. And yet, I've been invited to teach this course. But what I'm going to introduce you to would be an alternative way of thinking about the world, and especially in relation to ecology. And so over the years, since 2008, I've been teaching this course, and I have had the opportunity, the privilege, I should say, and honor to meet so many wonderful young people like yourself and Priscilla and the many others over the years. And one of the things I realized is that these young students that I met in my master's class, they were full of energy. They were, full of compassion. They wanted to change the world for a better place as it is at the moment. And they also wanted to engage in whatever way they can with making this world a much better place, as I keep mentioning this word, better place. And then I kept track with their activities. I also taught in Innsbruck in Austria, a course that was entitled Alternative Epistemologies. And together with those students, and together with the students that I've taught at La Trobe University, I found that once they finish their studies and out they go into working, some of them have gone into working in civil societies and NGOs and governments. And then I realized that that after a number of months or years in such organizations, they become disillusioned. Because what happens is that many of these various civil societies, organizations, they tend to embrace the various sorts of things, values, and various sorts of visions that we want to change in this world. And so they become disillusioned. And so I started to communicate with a number of my friends. And I said, let's look at a way of how we can bring together these great, wonderful young people to set up some kind of framework, not really an organization, but some kind of institutional backing where they can then engage in the kind of work that they can do, for the future. And the first thing we needed to do was to make it non-hierarchical and to change. And so this is where I came up with the various concepts of it being holocratic, in the sense that they will be, semi-autonomous groups working together, like-minded groups collaborating. So, holocratic as well as being non-hierarchical. And so we started thinking about this. At that time, in 2013, I was the director of the Center for Dialogue at La Trobe University. And there, I met a number of scholars who were engaged in this concept of, and working in the field of dialogue. So I brought all this together and I talked to a number of colleagues, and among them was Jennifer Murphy, a colleague of mine in Castellón as well. I also talked to a former student of mine, Liz Chapman, to the deputy director of the Center for Dialogue, Michaela's Michael, and we started to think about what we can set up. And Jennifer and I, we felt that we could set up an organization. And then it came to the point of what shall we call it? So I wanted dialogue as part of it, and that's the D in deep. And then I felt that dialogue is really important, because what happens in dialogue is we connect people. Yeah, we bring people together. They sit around the table. It's not just about talking, but it is also about listening actively and compassionately. So so that meant the EE stands for empathic engagement. So we, as humans, we are innately empathic. We are hardwired to feel, a sense of empathy for one another. But we still need to work on it, because we have got an economic system, we've got a military system that tends to block these various mirror neurons in our, brains. And neurosurgeons have pointed out that, one of the ways of doing this is to try to foster empathy. So the EE stands for empathic engagement, and then P is peace building. So when we talked about peace building, I believe very strongly, and this is where I think we share this view, Catherine, about working with indigenous peoples, that it is really important that we make peace with nature, and only then we'll be able to make peace with one another. And so the peace building. So we put all the different letters together of these words. The first letters of all these words, and we have deep. Now, so I decided that it was a lovely acronym, deep, but I also felt that, as you know, Catherine, that in Sanskrit the word deep stands for light or small lamp, and so deep. We believe that each member of deep is like a small lamp illuminating the darkness around the world that we live in. So, each deep member is, a deepster, someone who is actually holding a lamp. Now, I also liked deep as an acronym for the name of the organization, also because, I wouldn't say I'm a big fan of deep ecology, but there is a lot about deep ecology that I like. And so I wanted that kind of connection with deep ecology and the philosophy of deep ecology, especially as how it's a critique to the kind of shallow environmentalism that we have in this world today. Yes. And so, voila, we have this name, which sort of just came to me. And for these different reasons, later I felt that it would be an appropriate name for the for the wonderful group of people who are members, who come together, like-minded people who want to create or recreate or regenerate a world where there will be peacefulness and ecological regeneration.
This is really beautiful and amazing, because this is the first time I can hear the story from you, like from your work. So this is really beautiful, and also we can feel the emotion, and also like how you feel about this project. And I think it can we also I'm feeling it also, and this is beautiful, because in the Foundation Lüvo we are talking a lot about feeling and corporalities, and I think this is the way we can also dialogue with deep action network about how we feel, and also the empathic engagement. So the subject of the conversation today is, and you talk a little bit about many subjects, and I think it's very interesting about, for example, the critique on sustainable development, and I will come back to it later, because I think it's very central to all this project also. But first, I would like to know what is the colonial ecology for you, because we talk about deep ecology, which is kind of related also, but I know you worked a lot with indigenous communities in Malaysia, and that you have a personal experience with these communities, and what is like the colonial ecology for you, from if you start with your personal experience, for example?
Yeah, I really like your I think it's your decision to call this conversation decolonial ecology, and I really like it largely because I believe very strongly that the colonization of peoples is connected. In fact, it is has parallels with the colonization of nature and the colonization of the planet, or Mother Earth, or Pachamama, or whichever way you like to refer to it, or Gaia. And why I say that there is this parallels between the two, for a number of reasons. Because when we speak about colonialism or colonization, it entails domination, it entails destruction, diminution, it entails various sorts of degradation and devaluation, and these are all. I know all these words begin with D, but these are all various sorts of processes that are very that they are processes that are parallel to what we have done to nature. We have dominated over nature, or we think that we can dominate over nature, and we see what's happening at the moment now, and we see that we have destroyed nature. We have degraded it to the extent that it cannot regenerate without some kind of assistance that we can provide. We have devalued nature, and so all these various sorts of connections between colonization of people and colonization of nature. So the project of decolonization, I think, my personal view, it should also be be how we can emancipate our thinking from the various ways of how we have been kind of straddled, or kind of shackled in the way we think about the environment, and nature. And so I think the decolonial project is not just about trying to decolonize, with the way how colonialism has affected various people right around the world, but it is also one where we can try to emancipate the way we the kinds of shackled thinking that we have about the environment. So I believe very strongly that a decolonial project should also be in one that entails the decolonization of the environment. And if I can also make another point, Catherine, that this colonization has also led to displacement. Okay, so indigenous peoples have been displaced, and when we look at the word place, the displacement, place is an important part of our ecological connection. We have, for indigenous peoples that live in the forest is not just a space for them, it is a place, because the forest has, there's connection to their history, to their identity. And so the forests in some indigenous communities, they feel that, or they believe that the forest is like a parent. And so to be displaced is actually being removed from that kind of connection and displacement through colonialism. And one further point, sorry, you asked me this question and I'm just reflecting and thinking.
That's okay. We want to know like everything about what you're thinking about the colonial ecology.
Yeah.
It's really interesting, so that's fine.
But the other thing too, I was thinking about this is when you asked me this question just a minute ago, is that it also entails, this is where ecofeminists are spot on, because it also entails feminization. Because when we look at the the colonial project was also entailed the control of women's bodies, and and that kind of the attempt to emancipate, and especially in terms of how patriarchy is so closely entwined with the colonial project. And so I think it is also very much how, for example, Europeans feminized, say, you worked in India, and India became like the female body, and so you have Asia and Africa, and so in patriarchy, the domination by of by males or females, and then you also had the feminization of nature. Nature was considered to be like female, so it almost, in a way, in the minds of those people who held these kind of patriarchal values and views, for them, the domination of nature was, in many ways, was considered to be parallel, complementary, if I can use such a term, to the domination of nature. Sorry, domination of women. So, there are all these kinds of connections, and I think decolonial ecology ought to, focus on those kinds of political processes of decolonization.
Yeah, it's very interesting because it's about the relational ontology, like the relation that we have with nature, and also when you talk about the domination, and feminist authors worked a lot about the intersectional
Yes.
approach to talk about this relation with nature, and I'm trying to do that in my thesis to start from this ontology that we are the human is not the center of everything. It's more the relation that we have with nature, with the resources, and the resources are not just for livelihood. They are also because there is a spiritual connection, and the body is not disconnect from the nature. And also the question of vulnerability, like that it's related to a feminine way to see the environment and to see the nature. So there's a lot of work to do in that, and I know that you worked a lot with indigenous communities, and I read a little bit about your work, and when you talk about the nexus between equality, sustainability, and peace, and how this is like an alternative development approach. So it's not like sustainable development approach, but it's an alternative to that. So maybe we can make a link with this concept and the decolonial ecology. I don't know if you have something to say about that. Probably. Yeah.
Yes, I think the decolonial project is also decolonizing the mind, how we think about such issues. Now, when I first came up with the concept of sustainability, ecology, what I call ESP, equality, sustainability, and peace, quite some time ago. At that time, I felt that I was I found sustainable development to be problematic, largely because of the development word there, because I've always had strong discomfort with the word development, and some critiques have pointed out that development actually is a form of genocide, and not just killing of people, but it also killed of cultures. But so I felt that that kind of connection, it's an oxymoron, okay, as you know, in terms of sustainable development concept and the various criticisms, you know, leveled against it. But I at that time I thought that perhaps we can recuperate, we can kind of save the word sustainable, and you know, and have, and you know, embrace this concept of sustainability. But since then I've changed my mind, because I felt that the word sustain itself means um, you know, hold on to something, to strengthen something, you know, to keep something going. And when one uses the word sustain, it actually means that, you know, we want to keep things as they are. And the question that I started to ask maybe about 5 years ago was, can we sustain the current system? And the quick answer to that is no, we cannot. And that's why I believe very strongly in regeneration. And so today I would have called it regeneration, you know, equality, regeneration, and peace, or equity, regeneration, and peace. And the reason for this is because um, when we look at the concept of regeneration, this is natural. Sustainable is not a natural concept. You know, it is not some in an ecosystem. Ecosystems do not sustain something. What ecosystems do is they regenerate. And so we are being, you know, in touch with nature if we consider, you know, regeneration. So humans, in fact, regenerate things. We don't keep things as they are. It's not like keeping the status quo. Corporations want business as usual. Governments want things to continue as they are, because you know, in many cases the corporations are the ones that would benefit if things are as they are. Dependence on fossil fuel, dependence on, you know, profit maximization, economic growth. And you know, as far as you and I know, you know, that ecology, if we continue with economic growth, we continue with reliance on fossil fuel, you know, it's not just climate change that's going to, you know, lead to the end of humanity, but so many other, you know, ecological problems are going to surface. And in fact, today, the pandemic itself, the COVID-19, has a very strong connection with what we have done to nature and to, you know, the environment. Sorry, I'm tangent here, Catherine.
No, that's okay. And also, like the it's very interesting about the concept of sustainability, because also development, it's more like about progress. So we want to sustain a progress, a way that is always going to progress and to develop more and to extract more resources. So this is very a big problem, and I find it very interesting because, and you said that, I think, in another conference about like the big problem about sustainable development, and we are always teaching it. We are like right now, like in the classes, we have like sustainable development approach. We talk about it, and there's a lot of critics about this concept. And sometimes I don't understand why we are still teaching this concept when we can say like it didn't work, it doesn't work, it will not work. That if we want to change it, we have to look at other approach, and there is other approach that we can look at, and I think like the indigenous communities, we can learn a lot about it, and also about the experience of marginalized communities. And maybe we can, like, I worked a lot on the concept of justice, localized perspective on justice. So how we can start about the perspective from the marginalized communities, for example, when they're facing a conflict, where they're facing a project of the development project, extraction project, and like their perspective on the issue, and how we can start from there to develop a mechanism, to develop another way of thinking. And I don't know if you have something to say about the this way of thinking about environmental justice, and how we can link it to your proposition of not sustainability, but regeneration and equity and peace?
That's a wonderful question. I believe I keep pointing out what I refer to as peace ecology. That's if, and I did state this earlier, that if we and indigenous peoples know this, I learned about ecological regeneration from them in the 1970s when I had the the privilege of going and living with them and learning about their culture. And so this knowledge is long standing. It is time in since time immemorial. Indigenous peoples have worked out these various sort of regenerative processes. So to your question of how do we kind of the sort of connections that we can establish in terms of the regeneration, peace, and in terms of replacing sustainability. Now, to your question of why do we still continue teaching it?
Yeah.
If you are so critical of it, and the answer is very straightforward. It's to do with money, because universities have funded, and there is a lot of money that is put into sustainable development research projects. For example, you will find various sorts of since 2015, you find so many research projects that have been undertaken, and they would, relate the projects to fulfilling SDGs goal number 8 or SDGs goal. So it has become, as what I've referred to in my in some of my talks, it's a hegemonic strategy. Hegemonic in the sense that it has controlled the way we think. It's dominated our ideas, our ideology to the extent that we can't see any way out of it, that this is the only possible way. Yeah, it's like Margaret Thatcher some time ago referring to neoliberalism as Tina, there is no alternative. And what we are trying to say is that there is an alternative. Indigenous peoples have provided us with this alternative for for generations, but we have not we have devalued that. We have not listened to them. And so I think, yeah, it gives us an opportunity to go back and look at how we can so it entails first of all, um, perhaps, I can be accused of being focused on semantics, but I think language is really important. So let me just give you one word. Like when you ask me the question, you are still using the word develop. How can we develop? So this is a language a word that actually starts to it starts to capture the way we think about things. So is there another word that we can use instead of develop? How can we regenerate? Or maybe take another one. And while I believe that it's really important to begin with how we speak about things, largely because the discourses that we use are sometimes, in many ways, these discourses have been shaped by the various sorts of ideological foundations. Yeah. So we take another, when you ask me the question, marginalized communities. So when you use an adjective, marginalized, in reference to the communities, by just referring to them as marginalized communities, you have already continued with their marginalization, because you use an adjective to refer to the communities. But if you were to change the language, the way we speak about such communities, and instead, and I'm learning too, Catherine, because I make a lot of errors and mistakes of this sort, but I'm beginning to change the way I speak about them and the language that we use. And even when I say speak about them, as if like there is us and them, yeah, that kind of dualism and dichotomy. So we need to really think, or ways of how we can speak without in the way that leads to their marginalization. So instead of marginalized communities, if we were to change that and we say that communities that have been marginalized.
Mhm.
So in other words, they are actually communities that have been marginalized because someone, some group, some organization, some government has marginalized them. And it's not something that stems from their own inherent, sort of problems. So the adjective that we use
Mhm.
is, problematic unless we use it as an adverb. So language, that's perhaps the starting. But I want to hear more about. This is a conversation, and I'm doing a
Yeah.
lot of the talking. I'm doing a lot of the talking, and I'm very conscious of that.
No, but it's perfect because yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah, I'm happy to have you, and like me, it's an opportunity also. So this is perfect. And but when you talk about the concept, this is so yeah, this is a big problem. And I think if you talk about the process, like have been marginalized, this is really more like accurate because it's right. If you put an adjective on this, it's a big problem. We had a question from Danielle that you met, like Danielle, which is from
Yes.
the Foundation Lüvo also. She said, is it possible to decolonize the word development? So this is really interesting because it's true. Like, okay, we stopped to use this concept because there's a meaning, a big meaning like that coming with, but can we use it? Because this is it can be a beautiful word, like if we disconnect it to the word sustainable, because I think it's the merge of the both, and then which is the problem. So I don't know what you think about it, because I used to, yes, I'm trying to stop using this word also when I speak, but it's really hard. But also I want to maybe to subvert this concept to use it for another purpose. Oh.
Yeah, I know. It's a difficult. It's a very good question. Can we decolonize development? The word development. And interestingly, when Daniel asked the question, she asked, "Is it possible to decolonize the word development?" And the word development had quotation marks
Yeah,
around it, so it becomes kind of problematic. Now, I say about 10 years ago, I thought, yes, we should take the word development, as you said, it's a beautiful word. We should take the word development from, say, the neoliberalists or the various, governments that use this concept in order to dominate over, indigenous people. So my question was, can we recuperate? Can we take it back, and own it? And then I came up with I wrote, published a paper in Third World Quarterly, and my paper was entitled Alternative Development.
yeah,
And I thought,
very good paper.
I thought that was a very clever title, and then I realized that because I felt that it's a kind of development that was alternative to the mainstream development, but it is also a kind of development that was connected to indigenous peoples, and that's where alternative. And one of my several of my friends, I should say, but one of them in particular, whose work I admire, Shiv Vishwanathan in India. Shiv Vishwanathan, um, and another person, Boaventura de Sousa Santos, the Portuguese philosopher, and they asked the question, can you use the word development? And don't you think that? And we have great scholars like Arturo Escobar, Gustavo Esteva, Wolfgang Sachs, and all of them, the post-development scholars. They felt that the word development was so, contaminated. It was so tainted that it should be discarded into the dustbin of history. So, let's forget using the word development, because it is like it's like I mean, one way of using it, an analogy is like taking you take petrol or gasoline and then you say, okay, gasoline actually has some good things too. So let's change the way we think about gasoline. So maybe that's not a good analogy, but the point I'm trying to
I understand
the
the
point I'm
point.
trying to make is that you take something that is already contaminated, say pesticide. You take a pesticide and then you say that let's change the way we think about the pesticide. And then maybe we can use the word pesticide and we put inverted commas around it, and that makes it acceptable. um, that could be another terrible analogy on my part, but then the point I'm trying to make is that once the concept
Yeah,
is
I,
so
I,
deep, yeah,
I understand the point. Yes, it's really interesting, and also it's because the concept of development come with a big system of domination, as you said before. Like it came. It's not just like I think maybe in few years, one day, if we stop to use this word, maybe we could sometime take the word and give it another meaning. But at this moment, it comes with a big system of oppression, of domination against also communities and countries in the global south. It's really intense how it also doing like a duality between those. I have a question about, maybe we could come back to deep, because I think all this is really related to the work, to the deep work, what is doing in all around the world about trying to deconstruct concept, or trying to with empathic engagement, as you said, and also with the dialogue, trying to change the word we are using, and also having more empathy with communities and also with people, and just trying to understand how people live in this world, also with in this difficult world for many. So I don't know. Maybe we could come back to the work of Deep. I think it's really important to put forward this the work.
sure. Thank you. Yeah, that's a. Let's get back to deep. Okay. Now,
No, yes, it's just like because we could talk a lot
no,
about
no.
sustainable development, but
Yeah,
I think Deep, it's really related to this to all this work. Yeah.
I think, yeah, of course it is related, and the way I see it is because I spent a good part as a scholar, as an academic, deconstructing. I mean, use the word, deconstruct the word development. And what has happened in the process is that as academics, as critical scholars, we have just gone on deconstructing everything. And so deep is really an attempt to reconstruct, to construct,
Mm,
to
okay.
to come up with new ways, or novel ways. And also, when I use the word new ways, I don't mean that we are now creating new things. We are actually salvaging. We are
Mm,
salvaging wisdom. We are salvaging knowledges of indigenous peoples. The knowledges that are there. And as an anthropologist, I've had the honor of learning some of this from the indigenous peoples. You have as well, Catherine, with people in India. And
mm,
when we put what we have learned, the lessons that we have gained from them, we actually have the knowledge. We have and it's not just to do with our connections with nature. I
mm,
mean, there's a lot we can learn from indigenous peoples about how we should foster our respect for nature, but it is also largely to do with how we connect with one another. So empathy, how we can socialize, people to focus on generosity, to be generous with one another, how we can wean people away from greed, accumulation, from individualization, all about. I keep saying this, that many of the young today, I, I consider this to be an era of the selfie. You take a picture of yourself and all about your friends. And so how we can shift away from the selfie to, consider the others, the people. And the COVID-19, I think, is a fantastic, uh, you know, kind of lesson that we can gain. It has destroyed the lives and livelihood of so many people, sadly, right around the world. But at the same time, uh, you know, it is. I mean, it has really kind of it's been a kind of like a shocking, alarming bell for us, as humanity, that we because of all the destruction it has caused, this coronavirus, I think we should take it as an opportunity to change the way we live, the way we relate to the environment. But yet, I think we have a struggle at the moment because Lüvo, Deep, people like yourself, Priscilla, Daniel, we are all, we have a different, we want to envision a different, once we go through this dark tunnel in humanity at the moment, and when we see the light at the end of the tunnel, we want this light to be something that reflects the various values that indigenous peoples have. However, we have got to be really careful because in many of the governments that are led by kind of conservative governments, they have stacked all these various groups that are now coming up with visions for what they call post-COVID, and what they are actually focusing on is continuing the extractive industries, continuing fossil fuel, continuing all the various problems, of neoliberalism and oligarchic capitalism that we have had all these years. So I think the struggle is on for us. The ones who, in fact, want to envision a different world, and this is one a world where many of the values to do with equity, social justice, to do with regenerative ecology, to do with decolonizing not just the mind but also the ecology, and all these various important kinds of, I would say, values and practices, and you know, in the kind of anthropology of indigenous peoples that we should try to foster. And I think in the post-COVID world, it must be a world which embraces all these different values that you and I, hold dear, and largely because of what we have learned from indigenous peoples. So, in other words, in Spanish, buen vivir, the good life, and what should the people.
Oh, yeah, and also there's a lot of government that are putting like new policies actually, but they're not really new policies, but policies that want to generate the economy, and they are using the pandemic to do like the opposite that what we want, and this is very a big problem. But I agree with you. Like the struggle is on, and I think like we have to push for social justice. And I think Priscilla have a point on this about maybe what is happening in Colombia. Like,
yes. Oh wow! Thank you very much for. I don't know if I have answers or question after listening to you, but I guess more question than answers, because I was reflecting, Alberto, on what you were saying about changing our vocabulary and changing the way we're speaking, and also when you're talking about COVID, I'm just like, it's a whole structure. So you have on some sense individuals and groups and activists that are trying to change, but we have a whole system pushing us back to neoliberal capitalism. So I think sometimes when we're talking at the beginning about emotions, I think for me personally, sometimes it seems super big and super difficult to I mean, I tried not to be without hope or without but sometimes I'm just feeling that, and especially COVID was difficult in that sense, because it was just like being in our houses alone and trying to still keep the fight going and keep like our emotion intact and follow up with the struggles we've putting energy in, and that's, for me, it also poses the question of vulnerability and how, like, I have two questions actually. The first one would be like how to survive in this and how to recognize our vulnerability, our differential exposition to this vulnerability, and yes, and what I mean, we're all really tired of this year, but it's also, as you said, we're facing the fact that it's almost as neoliberalism is stronger than before COVID, you know? So, so that would be my first question. And my second question is because, you know, a lot of people from Colombia are listening to us, and mostly Lüvo is trying to adopt an anti-racist and feminist stance, and how we're like the situation in Colombia is horrific in terms of social leaders, and all the social leaders mostly that have been killed during the 4 last years since the peace agreement are all related to ecological struggles, or the substitution of coca culture, and you know, so I mean, my question would be in that, and it is related to the first question, because in that particular case where we're facing the opening of a country to extractivism, then like day to day people are trying to survive, but the social conditions and the structures are really difficult to combat, you know. So yeah, so what would be your thought on how we should orient those struggles in this context?
Yeah, I take your point. I think it is by no means easy. The task ahead is extremely difficult, but we also have to hold on to hope, because as you know, Raymond Williams says, to be radical, and I think we have to be more radical. And as Raymond Williams says, to be radical is to make hope possible, rather than despair convincing. Because what's happened is that we tend to find that people become, the sense of despair is so overwhelming that they feel that there are just no possibilities of changing. Now, right around the world, neoliberalism is on its deathbed. There is, you would think that neoliberal as an economic system will survive. I don't think so, because as soon as the COVID pandemic hits, neoliberalism had to turn. It had to turn to what we had previously: the stimulus package, the various packages right around the world in order to boost the people, economies, the essential workers, those people like the nurses, the medical services, public health, all those countries that were very deeply deeply enmeshed in neoliberalism are the countries that have been most severely affected. Okay, so if we look at Europe, we have Spain, Italy, we go to UK, from Thatcherism right through, it has essentially curtailed public health. We go to the US. The US is supposed to be one of the most, the most powerful nation in the world, but it can't deal with a virus. And because the public health in that system and the whole, Canada is a bit better than the US, but when we look at it, it's all to do with what neoliberalism has done in terms of privatization, in terms of the austerity drives, in cutting back funds. So what's happened now is that we are, it's also to do with an ideological struggle, where we have to now point out, and there are lots of people right around the world who are coming together, and I think it's really important that we set up much greater sort of collaboration. So we have people like Naomi Klein, We have, Bernie Sanders in the political realm. We have, various people right around the world. We have Jacinta Ardern. I believe very strongly that women leaders make better leaders, and largely because, they like, people like Jacinta Ardern in New Zealand. And when you look at a person like her, she is beginning to shift, and it's almost like a package deal. It comes, with shift away from focus on GNP, or focus on growth economics, to focusing on happiness and compassion, moving away, much more, greater investment in terms of, dealing with climate change. So all these come together, and I think it's really important that we work, we work closely with one another, because what has happened on our side of politics, if I can use the kind of dualism, is that we have been fragmented. So there is a fragmentation of concerns. We have been so deeply kind of, even within the left have been kind of struggling, fighting against, criticizing each other, and pointing out, the flaws of each other's, programs. And so this has led to the kind of divisions within the group, and the people on the right have been able to take advantage of this fragmentation and divisions. So I think this is where, Deep and Lüvo should play a greater role in all the various I hate to use the word progressive organizations, but what I mean, in terms of, let's call it radical
Yeah, I
organizations.
prefer
And radical in the sense that it does not mean, radical in the sense that the word radical itself has got a connection with roots.
Yeah.
So we are going right down deep into the roots of humanity and the wisdom of indigenous peoples. And I think this is where, we have to kind of come together, work together. We don't allow, competition with one another rule the way we relate to one another. We should focus on generosity, on collaboration, and I believe that we have to put in more effort into education and teaching. And as Priscilla, as you know, one of our deep members, Rachel Muson, runs Thought Box Education. So there are lots of these kinds of educational initiatives that right around the world, and we have to put in much greater effort in terms of challenging. It's a form of counter hegemony, because these ideas are hegemonic. Or as Priscilla knows, Priscilla, you know that I'm a Gramscian. So Antonio Gramsci, points out that as organic intellectuals, we have to put in much greater effort into, not just writing, marvelous papers and publishing in journals that nobody reads, but we have to engage more in terms of, public, and try to get more people, I use the word education, but in a Paulo Freire's sense of education, of raising consciousness, of conscientization, awareness.
And Priscilla Joka had a question about, I think it's really related about what we are talking about. Can you talk about the role of a North-South relation in decolonizing?
North-South relation, yes.
Yes, and
certainly.
That's really interesting because we were talking about collaboration, and I think translocal collaboration and also dialogue is very important. Like what we are doing in Deep and Lüvo, we are a local group, and we are working with a person in Colombia, in India, and we are trying to share experience and to dialogue with a person in translocalities. And I think it's maybe a part of the answer, and maybe you could answer to Priscilla.
Sure. Indeed, I would be happy to do that. If we take the dichotomy north-south to refer to power differential, that means the north more dominant and compared to the south. then the relation is going to be problematic because the North will always have this kind of dominating role over the South. If you were to take the North and South dichotomy in terms of what you refer to as translocal, that means it's more to do with locality. So if I'm, up, if you are living in Canada, so you're part of the global North, and if someone is, although Australia should be part of the global South, but we are geographically. So if you take that, then I use the word like-minded people. So, and the reason for this is because you can be located, you can be living in any part of the world. So, like for example, Boaventura de Sousa Santos, in his book The Epistemologies of the South, he points out, that when one talks about Europe, uh, we have the South in Europe itself. We have, people, communities that have been marginalized. We have refugees. We have new, migrants. We have, sort of, LGBTI people. We have people who have been, even, like in terms of patriarchy, female bodies, all these are, in fact, they are, aspects of the global South in the North. So it's not to do, the point I'm trying to make is that there is the South very much living in the North. And so we have to keep that in mind. So when you speak about North South, if you're talking about in terms of relations of domination and subordination, then it's a different meaning. So in the case of Canada, for example, you have indigenous peoples, the Indians in Canada. They would be, people who one would consider to be the global South. Okay, in the past, they were referred to as the Fourth World, but that was also problematic in dividing the world into three, especially when in the Cold War period, it was to do with a struggle between the first and the second world. So the and for me, I think we also have to try to free ourselves from the kind of dualisms that we have, the kind of Cartesian dichotomization that there's a north and the south, and then there is all these different kinds of dichotomies that are being created, and then this leads to be divisions. And what we have to try to work out, and the way I think about as in deep, one of the things we do is to bridge divides, and not build walls, because I'm in the past, I've always considered myself to be part of the global south, and I didn't want to have anything to do with the global north, because I felt that it would be, as being a post-colonialist, it would be kind of working with the enemy, as it were, because we have all these kinds of dichotomies in our mind about who are the friends and who are the enemies, who are the evil people and who are the devils, and we start to think in those kinds of Cartesian ways. But I think we have to try to emancipate ourselves from that kind of thinking and just focus on, irrespective of where you are, um, irrespective of who you are, and irrespective of your own sort of identities or your ontologies, your epistemologies, we must all come together and look at ways of how we can. So if you want to continue with the dichotomies, I should say, then we should probably think about the left and the right, because the problem we have now is with the right wing, with the conservatives, with the and so, but yet again, in order to win people over on, as once again Boaventura says, on our side, if we want to get them to be our side, if we continue to put them there, then it becomes very difficult to bring them to our side of politics. And that's why Antonio Gramsci is important. We we have to work out counter hegemonically. I'm sorry, Priscilla, but I hope I've responded to your question.
Well, I think you put more question than answers, because it's a call for dichotomizing our thought. And so, but yeah, I think Alberto, you're right in taking this this stance on questioning, also because it's related to what you said on discourses, like how can we stop thinking in forms of dualities and really revise it, and I think it's what decolonization, like the colonial thought, is trying to do, like trying to question really like epistemologies, not only like what are our praxis or like our practical gesture every day, and so I think it went so fast. We already did an hour of talking. Also Priscilla said thank you very much for your insight. So I think you answered her question. So
I should say de nada, Priscilla.
So
very little Spanish that I know, unfortunately.
Well, you begin to know more with all those networking with Deep, I guess. You're not sure? I just want to invite people to follow the work of Deep also on Facebook. We have a Facebook group where there's a lot of activists that are working and I think taking a little bit your invitation, Alberto, which is I think central to the work of Deep and Lüvo, is creating alliances, and so with sharing also all our knowledge would be really useful for our willingness to transform social realities. So we invite you to follow the work of Deep, the work of Lüvo, and we want to invite you also, before we conclude our presentation, I wanted to invite you in the name of Lüvo to submit your contribution because the topic we talked about today, we have a call for paper, poems, art, piecework, whatever you want to suggest. There's no one size fits all way to propose something to Revista Lüvo. So the next issue will be about voices from the earth, feminist ecology. Sorry, I'm translating on the go. Feminist ecologies. So our idea is to make it very focused on our relationship with La Madre Tierra. You talk about the Buen Vivir and also all the ecofeminist perspective on what's going on, a critique to neoliberal predation, and also all the struggles and the community struggles that are already there. As you said, Alberto, it's just a matter of listening, to what has been what everyone in an indigenous community or in other communities that have been working on those topics since, and those epistemologies too. So we're receiving your contribution until December 15. So we'll be really happy to hear the different voices all around the world. You can submit in the language you want. We cannot guarantee we'll be able to review, but we're trying to open to as many languages as we can. And I just want to close this with a an invitation to create those alliances, and to thank you so much, Alberto, for being here. Thank you, Catherine, for the moderation of the space, and thank you for all the questions, reflections, and emotions also, I guess, that you're leaving us with.
Yeah, it gave us a lot of idea about the next issue of Lüvo. I think, I hope the people that are listening to us will have more idea from our conversation. It was really interesting. Thank you, Alberto. I was really happy to have this discussion with you, and I hope we'll have the opportunity to talk more.
And meet in person, please.
And meet in person, please. Yeah.
I'm sure we will. Yeah, either you come and visit me in Melbourne. I'm not going to visit you in Montreal at the moment because I know it's bitterly cold.
We'll come in Melbourne.
Or we can meet halfway in India. So,
that could be nice.
Good idea.
It's a good idea. Let's hope for a post-COVID.
I should also say thank you very much for this opportunity to speak about DEEP and to share, the ideas that we have. And a lot of these ideas are, ideas that we share, and it's not just me sharing these ideas. And I should also sort of follow up with what Priscilla has said about DEEP. And DEEP is a very flexible organization. It's inclusive, it is egalitarian. As I mentioned, we follow a holocratic system of organization. So anyone can be a member of DEEP, and all you need to do is to bring together a group of people, and you set up what we call a DEEP circle. And so the way DEEP works is that it's a network of multiple circles, and it can be a circle any part of the world where you bring a group of people together. It can be your own family members, it can be your friends, it can be anyone that you want to work together on a particular kind of project. And then once you have all these DEEP circles and the various people, Priscilla is also one of the members of the global circle. And what we will do is we'll coordinate all these circles, put them in touch with one another, and right around the world, we have a very kind of group of people who in fact come together, and they are very much the source of my inspiration because they keep me moving because of their compassion and tremendous energy and enthusiasm that they have. So thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity for me to speak.
Thank you so much, Alberto, and thank you for sharing your time with us, and also thank you to all the people that were with us virtually today. Thank you to all our colleagues also of Lüvo that are with us, Catherine, Daniel, Gira, that are always there, even if we don't see them on the screen. I hope that we can meet soon. Y muchas felicidades a Lüvo por 2 años de existencia. Yeah. Happy birthday to Lüvo.
Happy birthday, yes. Happy anniversary.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Namaste.